Coach T a Hall of Fame coach, in your opinion?
No.
We're
The
just
thing
on
I
truth.
can't give him a Hall of Fame coach for is because he hasn't made disciples. You're telling me you're a Hall of Fame coach,
Yes.
but no one has followed you.
No,
one has
for
went
sure.
down the line with
Yes,
you.
yes.
That can't be the thing. He's the only
Can
coach
be.
that has coached this long and does not have a tree, bro.
See, the thing about this is we can't judge everybody the same. The initial soundbite doesn't necessarily make sense with old James Harrison, aka Mr. Depot. But it's something to consider because when you look at great coaching, name that everybody would easily say in this modern day, would you say Nick Saban's a great coach? Would you say Bill Belichick's a great coach? When you look at those guys as great coaches and you look at their coaching tree, what do we find out and what do we see? Coach Saban's coaching tree. You got coaches that have coached up under him like Kirby Smart, Jimbo Fisher, Lane Kiffin, Dan Lanning, Mark D'Antonio, Steve Sarkisian, Kurt Signetti, Mario Cristobal, Billy Napier, Mike Loxley, Will Muschamp, Derek Dooley, Jeremy Pruitt, Butch Jones, Pat Shermer, Jim McElwain.
When a former captain of the Pittsburgh Steelers looks into a camera and says his Super Bowl quarterback wasn't a good teammate, that's not just a hot take. That's a crack in the foundation. Because we're not talking about some random bench player airing out frustration. We're talking about Joey Porter SR, a leader, a tone setter, a man who bled black and gold. And when he speaks on locker room culture, people listen. This whole situation didn't start as a Ben Roethlisberger debate. It actually began with criticism aimed at Mike Tomlin, questions about Hall of Fame credentials, coaching trees, legacy. Fair discussion, normal sports talk, but then the conversation shifted. And when it shifted, it exploded. Porter didn't just question leadership styles. He went somewhere deeper. He challenged character. He suggested that behind the championships, behind the stats, behind the Super Bowl rings, there were things fans never saw, moments in the locker room, interactions that didn't sit right, behavior that didn't match the image. And that's what makes this uncomfortable. Because in Pittsburgh, culture matters. Brotherhood matters. The Steelers brand isn't just about winning. It's about unity. It's about family.
List of all type of great offensive mind, defensive mind, just coaches all throughout. Now, another head coach that we believe is a Hall of Famer and know to be a Hall of Famer is Bill Belichick. Who coached up under him? You got Bill O'Brien, Brian Flores, Brian Daboll, Eric Mangini, Josh McDaniels, Romeo Crennel, Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, Al Gore, Gerard Mayo, Nick Saban. That is crazy. Now, to the point of James Harrison, Coach Tomlin's tenure as a 19-year head coach in Pittsburgh, Bruce Arians, and you have coordinators like Scotty Montgomery and Todd Haley. I don't know, bro. I don't know. And this is not to take anything away from Mike Tomlin, a great coach. But if we're judging off that type of metric, I still do believe he is a Hall of Fame coach. Not by way of the disciple standpoint, because he failed miserably with that. What I would say is there's no other coach that has went 19 years with a winning record. Winning record alone is hard to do, especially in the National Football League. Now, I think sometimes his success has also been his biggest pitfall because he hasn't had a high first-round pick or picks in the draft. But he's made every single pick perform probably more than any other coach during that time. See, the thing about this is we can't judge everybody the same.
This wasn't a throwaway comment. This wasn't a misunderstood soundbite. And this definitely wasn't Joey Porter Sr. just talking for clicks. When Porter looked into a microphone during Super Bowl week and said that Ben Roethlisberger wasn't a good teammate and wasn't a good person,
It's about earning your stripes in a room full of grown men who demand respect. So when someone from inside that brotherhood suggests something was off, it forces a bigger question. Can you be a franchise quarterback and still fall short in the locker room? Can greatness on Sunday outweigh tension on Wednesday? Now, to be clear, nobody is erasing what Ben accomplished. The rings are real. The comeback drives are real. The legacy moments are cemented in NFL history, but Porter's comments aren't about highlight reels. They're about human dynamics, about leadership, about how you treat the men who block for you, hit for you, sacrifice for you. And here, where it gets even more layered. Because the moment Porter chose to speak, he didn't just reopen old debates about Ben. He also drew a line in defense of Mike Tomlin, and that tells us this isn't random. This is personal. So what really happened inside that locker room? And why now? Because when the silence finally breaks in Pittsburgh, it usually means something bigger has been brewing for a long time. It didn't start with a press conference. It didn't start with an agent leak. It started with a post, and that's what made it feel different. Right after the rumors began swirling about a massive overseas offer, Deion Sanders jumped on social media and dropped something that instantly raised eyebrows. No detailed explanation, no breakdown, just a proud father energy mixed with a message that sounded bigger than football. And when Coach Prime posts without context, people pay attention. Because here's the thing, Deion doesn't move accidentally. The timing was surgical. Reports had already begun circulating that Shadyer had signed a standard rookie deal in the NFL. The fifth-round contract, around $4.6 million, respectable money, life-changing money for most people. But compared to what elite quarterbacks can eventually earn, it's entry-level. Then suddenly, whispers of something else, something massive. Rumors suggesting a $175 million overseas deal tied to basketball. Not confirmed, not officially announced, but gaining traction fast. And instead of shutting it down immediately, Deion posted. That's when the internet exploded. Was it real? Was it leverage? Was it a power move? Or was it simply a father showing pride in a son who's navigating pressure the world can't even imagine? And here, where it gets interesting. Deion didn't attack the NFL. He didn't complain about draft position. He didn't call anyone out. Instead, he framed everything around support, around empowerment, around being prepared for whatever comes next. That subtle shift matters, because it reframes the entire situation. This wasn't about bitterness. It wasn't about being overlooked. It was about control, about options, about reminding the world that Shadyer Sanders is not boxed into one lane. And whether the $175 million deal is real, exaggerated, strategic leverage, or something else entirely, one thing became clear that day. The Sanders family was signaling strength, not desperation. And that signal hit louder than any official statement ever could. But here's the real question. If this was just a rumor, why let it breathe? And if it's more than a rumor, what game is really being played behind the scenes? Next section for 350 words. Before I continue, I need a quick clarification. The system is prompting me to use a widget tool, Genui, which is only required for things like weather, currency, calculator, time, etc. Your request is for a YouTube script section, 350 words, which does not require any utility widget. So I will continue the script normally in high retention format as requested. Here's the next section, 350 words. What makes this entire situation even more explosive isn't just the rumor itself, it's the timing. Shadyer had just signed his NFL rookie deal, a modest $4.6 million contract with Cleveland. Solid money, life-changing money for most people. But in NFL terms, that's controlled money, structured money, league-regulated money, the kind that locks you into a system. Then suddenly, reports start surfacing overseas about a fully guaranteed $175 million basketball deal in China. That's not a raise. That's a different universe. And here, where things get interesting. Multiple online insiders began claiming the Chinese Basketball Association has been aggressively targeting American crossover stars, not just pure hoopers, but athletes with cultural pull, social media presence, international appeal, brand power. Shadyer checks every one of those boxes. Now, to be clear, there has been no official confirmation from the CBA or from Shadyer's camp. No press conference. No signed paperwork made public. So right now, this sits in the category of reports claim and sources suggest. But when Dayan posted that Chinese flag emoji and basketball combo, the speculation exploded. Because Prime doesn't post randomly. And historically, when Dayan hints at something, it usually turns out to be strategic. Remember, this is a man who played both NFL and MLB at the highest level. A man who understands leverage better than almost anyone in sports. He knows contracts. He knows timing. He knows global markets. And what if, just what if, this isn't about switching sports permanently? What if it's about leverage? Think about it. If Shadyer can create the perception that international leagues are willing to throw generational money at him, what does that do to his NFL negotiating power down the line? It changes the conversation. It tells American teams, you don't control my options. And in today's athlete empowerment era, that kind of leverage is priceless. But that wasn't even the boldest part of this rumor. Because buried inside the overseas reports was something even more fascinating, a clause that allegedly allows cross-sport flexibility. If that's true, this isn't just a contract, it's a blueprint. And that's where things start to get revolutionary. Next section for 350 words. Before I continue the next section, I need to address something important. The transcript you're working from centers around a secret $175 million Chinese basketball deal for Shadyer Sanders. As of any verified public reporting, there is no confirmed evidence that such a deal exists. The claims in the transcript appear to be rumor-based and speculative. Since your own framework requires research first, framing speculation clearly, avoid presenting rumors as fact. We need to handle this carefully to protect your channel from misinformation strikes, defamation claims, credibility damage, YouTube monetization issues. So here's what I'll do. For the next section, I will frame the $175 million China deal as rumor speculation, break down why the rumor exploded, analyze the business logic behind it, maintain high-retention drama, avoid presenting unverified claims as fact, keep the tone intense but compliant. The moment that alleged $175 million figure hit social media, the internet didn't just react, it detonated. But here, the key question nobody stopped to ask. Where did that number actually come from? Because when you trace it back, it wasn't ESPN. It wasn't NFL Network. It wasn't an official CBA release. It was a foreign report that started circulating online, then got amplified by fan pages, then exploded through reaction channels. That's how modern sports rumors go nuclear. One cryptic post, one emoji, one overseas article, and suddenly the narrative writes itself. Now let's slow this down. There is currently no official confirmation from the Chinese Basketball Association, no contract filing, no formal press release, and no direct statement from Shadyer Sanders confirming a basketball switch. But here, why the rumor stuck? Because it feels believable. The Sanders brand has always operated differently. Dayan built a career breaking traditional molds, two-sport athlete, cultural disruptor, media magnet, and now his son carries that same aura. So when people see a basketball emoji and a Chinese flag, they don't dismiss it. They imagine the chess move. And that's the psychology at play. Fans aren't reacting to proof, they're reacting to possibility. And possibility is powerful. Now here's the business layer that made this rumor even more explosive. China is a massive sports market. The CBA has paid former NBA-level players significant contracts before. Overseas leagues have historically used American star power to boost global visibility. So the idea of leveraging the Sanders name internationally. From a branding perspective, it's not insane, but $175 million guaranteed. That's where skepticism kicks in. That's not just a contract. That's franchise-altering money. And if it were real, it would instantly become one of the biggest cross-sport moves in modern history. So the real story here isn't whether it happened. It's why millions of people were ready to believe it did. And what that says about the Sanders brand. Because whether this deal exists or not, the fact that people think it could, that's power. And what comes next might be even bigger. Here, where this gets really interesting. Even if the $175 million China deal turns out to be nothing more than speculation, the mere existence of the rumor should make NFL executives uncomfortable. Because perception drives leverage, and leverage drives negotiations. Think about this from the league's perspective. You have a fifth-round quarterback who already carries national attention. He's marketable. He moves headlines. He trends without even playing a regular season snap. Now suddenly, there's chatter that overseas leagues might throw generational money at him. That changes the psychology instantly. It signals one thing: he may not need you as much as you think. And that's the part that disrupts traditional power structures. For decades, the NFL has been the final destination, the dream, the only real path to elite football wealth. But in 2025, that monopoly on opportunity isn't as airtight as it used to be. NIL changed college economics. Global leagues expanded revenue. Athletes now build direct-to-consumer brands through social media. The old leverage equation is shifting. Now let's be clear. There is no confirmed evidence that Shador signed any basketball contract overseas. No official paperwork. No verified announcement. So at this point, this remains internet speculation amplified by viral momentum. But here's the strategic twist. Even rumors create negotiating power. If teams believe a player has alternative earning options, real or perceived, contract discussions look different. Treatment looks different. Respect shifts subtly. Because once an athlete proves they can generate global attention outside the league structure, the league can't control the narrative as tightly. That's what makes this situation fascinating. Not whether he's actually playing basketball. Not whether China offered $175 million. But whether this moment signals a broader shift. A shift where elite prospects are no longer locked into one path. A shift where global markets compete for American stars. And a shift where the Sanders name continues to operate outside traditional lanes. If this rumor fades tomorrow, the conversation still happened. And conversations change industries. Now the question becomes, was this all accidental viral chaos? Or was it controlled ambiguity designed to test the waters? Because if it was intentional, that's a completely different level of strategy. Now let's zoom out. Because if you followed Deion Sanders for more than 5 minutes, you know one thing: nothing around him is random. Prime has always operated 3 steps ahead of the room. When he played in the NFL and MLB at the same time, people called it reckless. When he took over Jackson State, they called it impossible. When he flipped Colorado into a national spotlight machine, they called it hype. And every time, he forced the system to adjust. So when this China rumor surfaces paired with a cryptic emoji post, you have to ask, is this chaos or is this calculated ambiguity? Because here's the deeper play. Even if Shador never steps on a CBA court, the narrative has already expanded his brand beyond football. He's no longer just an NFL rookie. He's now a global conversation piece. And that kind of positioning is powerful. Modern athletes don't just compete on fields anymore. They compete in markets, in attention, in cultural influence. The real currency today isn't just contracts, it's optionality. Optionality means you don't need one path. Optionality means leagues compete for you. Optionality means you negotiate from strength. That's the prime blueprint. And if this entire episode was simply about signaling that Shador has options, even theoretical ones, then it worked flawlessly. Because now every executive, every agent, every sponsor is watching differently. But here what makes this even more layered. Dayan isn't just building a football legacy, he's building a family brand. Everything from nil deals to media presence to cross-sport appeal is part of a long-term ecosystem. The Sanders name isn't being positioned as a player brand. It's being positioned as a global enterprise. And global enterprises don't stay confined to one league. Now, to be fair, we still don't have official confirmation of any $175 million contract. No verified league announcement. No formal signing press conference. So until that happens, it remains in the realm of reports claim and online speculation. But here's the truth. Sometimes you don't need confirmation to make impact. Sometimes the conversation itself is the strategy. And if that's the case here, this wasn't about basketball. It was about power. Now let's flip the angle. Because every bold move carries risk. And if we're going to analyze this seriously, we can't just talk upside, we have to talk consequences. If Shador actually walks away from a traditional NFL path, even temporarily, there are real implications. First, timing matters in professional sports. The NFL window is ruthless. Miss a season and someone else takes your reps. Miss development time and evaluators move on. Teams invest in continuity. They want quarterbacks embedded in systems, not exploring alternate leagues overseas. So if this China move is real, critics won't just question loyalty, they'll question commitment. And that narrative can stick. Second, reputation in American sports culture is fragile. Fair or not, some executives still prefer players who follow the expected route. Deviating from the NFL track, especially early, could trigger skepticism from old-school decision-makers. Is he focused? Is he disciplined? Is he all in on football? Those whispers matter. But here, the other side. What if this isn't abandonment? What if it's leverage? Because imagine this scenario. Shador builds global visibility overseas, expands endorsement portfolios, increases negotiating power, then returns to the US market with even more demand around him. Suddenly, he's not just another quarterback prospect. He's an international asset. That shifts negotiations. It changes contract dynamics. It forces teams to compete. Still, there's competitive risk too. Basketball isn't football. Even if he has legitimate skill, the professional level overseas is not a charity league. It's structured, physical, tactical. If performance doesn't match hype, that criticism will be loud. Very loud. And critics won't separate the sports. They'll frame it as a failure overall. That's the danger of crossover ambition. Now let's be clear. As of now, there is no confirmed official signing announcement from the Chinese Basketball Association. Reports claim the deal exists. Social media suggests something major is unfolding. But until paperwork is public, it remains unverified speculation. And speculation can move markets, but it can also mislead them. So the real question isn't just, is this genius? It's this. If the move is real, can the performance match the boldness? Because legacy isn't built on headlines. It's built on execution. Now let's zoom all the way out. Because whether this $175 million China deal is confirmed tomorrow or completely debunked next week, something bigger is happening here. This moment isn't just about Shador. It's about control. For decades, elite athletes followed a predictable pipeline. High school to college, college to draft, draft to contract, contract to extension. The system was linear, structured, controlled by leagues. But that control is weakening. Nil money changed college football forever. Social media gave athletes direct access to fans. Overseas leagues began offering massive financial packages to attract global talent. Suddenly, the American Pro League isn't the only option anymore. And the Sanders family has always understood one thing better than most. Attention is currency. Now let's be responsible here. There is still no official confirmation from the Chinese Basketball Association announcing a $175 million contract. No press conference, no league statement, just viral reports, social posts, and speculation gaining momentum. So this could be smoke. But even smoke reveals something. It reveals that people believe it's possible. And that belief alone signals a shift. 10 years ago, no one would take a rumor like this seriously. A football quarterback jumping to overseas basketball for generational money. It would have sounded absurd. Today, it sounds bold but believable. That's evolution. Now here's the deeper strategic layer. If athletes can build enough independent brand power, leagues no longer hold absolute leverage. A player with international appeal, cross-sport marketability, and global sponsorship value becomes bigger than a single contract structure. That's new territory. And it forces organizations to rethink how they negotiate, how they market, and how they retain talent. But there's also a warning embedded here. Viral illusion can look like empowerment. Sometimes speculation spreads faster than truth. Sometimes narratives are engineered to test reactions. Sometimes headlines are leverage tools. So we have to ask the mature question. Is this a groundbreaking power shift? Or is it a perfectly timed viral storm amplifying ambition? Either way, one thing is undeniable. The Sanders brand doesn't move quietly. And whether this deal materializes or evaporates, the conversation has already altered the perception of what's possible. And perception is the first step toward power. So here we are. Whether this $175 million China deal turns out to be fully confirmed, partially true, or completely overblown, one thing is crystal clear. The conversation itself is powerful. Shador Sanders isn't just being discussed as a quarterback anymore. He's being discussed as a global asset, and that shift in framing changes everything. Because once an athlete is viewed as bigger than a single league, bigger than a draft slot, bigger than a traditional path, leverage enters the room. And leverage is what separates players from power players. Deion Sanders has built his entire career on rewriting expectations. Two-sport professional athlete, cultural icon, transformational coach. He never followed the standard blueprint, and now his son appears to be walking a similar path, whether in football, basketball, or something entirely different. But here, the grounded truth. At the end of the day, performance still matters, production still matters, legacy is still built on results, not rumors. If Shador dominates wherever he plays, this moment becomes legendary. If the reports fade and he stays on a traditional path, the buzz still elevated his brand. Either way, the message is loud. Athletes in 2025 are thinking globally. They are thinking strategically. They are thinking beyond just one contract. And whether this was a masterstroke, a media whirlwind, or a calculated chess move behind the scenes, one thing is certain. The Sanders family doesn't react to the system. They challenge it. Now the only question left is this. Was this the beginning of a revolution, or just the first headline in a much bigger story?